People think politics is boring. Paper, suits, talking points. But let me tell you something most cameras never show. Behind the polished microphones and rehearsed smiles, there is a battle of facts versus fear happening in real time. And the truth is being buried under layers of noise so thick, most people don't even realize they're breathing it in. I was standing there watching and listening when I realized something wasn't adding up. The words on one side of the room sounded confident, almost convincing, but the numbers, the timelines, the actual evidence, they told a completely different story. And that gap, that dangerous space between what is said and what is real, is where the lie lives. Everyone keeps hearing the same claims on repeat: border in chaos, crime out of control, the country is falling apart. Say it enough times, and people start to feel it must be true. But feelings are not facts. And the moment I started tracing those claims back to their source, something strange happened. The story started cracking. Little inconsistencies turned into big contradictions. Statements made on television didn't match statements made days earlier. Policies blamed for disasters didn't even exist at the time of those disasters. That's when I realized this wasn't just political spin. This was a carefully constructed narrative designed to scare people into not asking questions. Nadia lo esperaba, but the deeper I went, the clearer it became. There were documents buried in plain sight, reports ignored by headlines, numbers hidden at the bottom of pages no one thought to read. And every time those numbers came close to the light, someone changed the subject. Someone pointed to a new threat, a new enemy, a new reason to panic. It was like watching a magician wave one hand while hiding the truth in the other. What if I told you that during some of the loudest speeches about rising crime, the actual local data showed either flat trends or declines in certain major categories? What if I told you that while officials warned about unprecedented border surges, internal reports acknowledged patterns that had been repeating for years, just with different labels attached? The language had changed, the tone had intensified, but the reality had not exploded the way people were being told it had. And here is the part that makes people uncomfortable. Fear is profitable, not always in money, but in power, in control, in attention. Fear makes people stop thinking critically and start clinging to whoever sounds the most certain. Fear makes people share headlines without reading the article. Fear makes people choose sides without ever checking what those sides are actually standing on. There was a moment, standing in that hallway outside a hearing room, when I saw two very different worlds collide. On one side, cameras and microphones, capturing clean, sharp, perfectly phrased statements about law and order. On the other side, quiet staffers walking past, with folders full of statistics that told a far more complicated story. No one stopped them. No one asked for those files. They were invisible because they weren't loud. And that's when another question hit me. If the truth is there, written down, logged, recorded, then who benefits from people never seeing it? Who gains from the distortion of reality? Who wins when fear becomes the headline instead of fact? Look closer and you start to notice patterns. Talking points repeated word for word in different places on different days. Social posts echoing exact phrases used in speeches just hours earlier. Entire segments framed around one shocking anecdote while ignoring broader context. It isn't random. It's coordinated. It's careful. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Here comes the part most people will pretend not to hear. Some of the same people who publicly condemn lawlessness vote against funding for systems that would actually reduce overcrowding, speed up processing, and provide structure. Some of the same voices that cry about chaos quietly block bills that would create clearer guidelines and stronger oversight. It sounds irrational until you understand that the chaos is not a bug, it's a feature. Think about it. If the system was fixed, if the data was transparent, if the process was efficient, then the fear-based narrative would collapse. And without that narrative, some careers would collapse with it. La verdad sale a la luz, but only for those who dare to look. There is another layer to this nobody likes to talk about. When people in power use broad, dramatic language, they aren't just describing a problem. They're shaping an image of human beings as numbers, threats, shadows. Real lives get reduced to statistics used for clout. Families become talking points. Desperation becomes a soundbite. And once that happens, empathy becomes optional. Somewhere in the middle of all this, a different kind of voice rises. A voice that doesn't match the script. A voice that refuses to soften the truth for comfort or approval. When that voice speaks, you can feel the air in the room change. You can feel the tension, because facts have a way of disturbing comfortable lies. I watched as calm explanations met loud interruptions. I watched as direct questions were dodged, reframed, ignored. I watched as someone tried to twist the meaning of basic statistics to fit a headline instead of letting the numbers speak for themselves. But here's what they didn't realize. More people were watching than they thought. Not just reporters, not just analysts. Ordinary citizens were taking notes, replaying footage, slowing down audio, screenshots, 4K clarity in a world full of blur. The belief that people won't check anymore is one of the biggest miscalculations being made. Yes, many scroll past, but the ones who stop, the ones who dig, they are changing the narrative, quietly, one piece of truth at a time. And now, let me take you to the before and after, because this is where it gets interesting in a way no speech can erase. Before the outcry, before the sensational headlines, look at the actual budget lines. Look at the policy proposals sitting in committee. Look at who supported comprehensive reform and who stalled it repeatedly. Those records don't lie. They just sit there, waiting. Then look at the after. The same voices who stalled progress suddenly pointing fingers and blaming others for the mess. The same officials who dismissed concerns now acting shocked that nothing was solved. That emotional performance might work on a crowd for a moment, but it cannot rewrite a paper trail. Here is something most people still haven't connected. The loudest critics of the current situation often rejected solutions when they had the opportunity to implement them. They voted against modernization, against infrastructure, against expanded resources, and then turned around and used the predictable results of that obstruction as proof that everything was broken. It's like breaking a window and then screaming that the house is unsafe. Let that sink in for a second. Now imagine if someone put all of that on one screen, side by side, date by date, vote by vote, statement by statement, no emotion, just facts. It would be impossible to hide behind slogans at that point. The image would be too clear. Almost like 4K. People don't like being confronted with the idea that they may have been manipulated. It's uncomfortable, it's easier to defend the lie than admit you were sold one. But growth only happens when discomfort is faced instead of avoided. What I find most fascinating is what happens in the silence after the truth lands. There's no big dramatic argument, no grand apology, just a pause, a noticeable shift. Because in that silence, everyone knows something changed. And then comes the attempt to distract, a new controversy, a new accusation, a new enemy to focus on. But the timing is always suspect. Right when eyes start turning toward the real issue, a new shiny object is thrown into the room. Classic misdirection, oldest trick in the book. But there are people who are no longer looking at the object. They are looking at the hand that threw it. The internet never forgets. Video clips never forget. Screenshots never forget. Receipts never forget. And once a pattern is documented, it doesn't matter how many speeches are made to deny it. The pattern speaks louder. It's not about party at that point. It's not about red or blue. It's about truth versus narrative, reality versus performance. And the moment you realize that, everything changes. You stop being a passive listener and become an active observer. Some try to turn it into a personality war. Some try to reduce it to name-calling. That usually means they've lost the argument on substance. When facts are strong, insults become the only shield left. And let's not forget the people affected on the ground. Real families, real communities, real workers, real students, real people who carry the weight of these political games while watching leaders play chess with their lives from behind expensive desks. They don't need another speech. They need solutions built on honesty, not hysteria. The most dangerous lies are the ones repeated so often they start sounding like truth. That's why repetition is such a powerful tool in politics. But it's also why one clear, undeniable, documented counterpoint can shatter the whole illusion. Imagine watching a wall built brick by brick on shaky ground. It looks strong until someone points out the foundation is missing. That is what is happening right now. The foundation of the narrative is being questioned, and no amount of shouting can rebuild it once it cracks. This is the moment they hoped would never come. The moment when the script stops working, when people don't clap on cue, when they don't get angry on command, when they don't share the meme without checking the context. They don't want you to see the timelines lined up. They don't want you to see the contradictions replayed back to back. They don't want you to notice how the story shifts depending on who's speaking and who's watching. But once you see it, you can't unsee it. And that's the real power here. Not in a politician, not in a party, but in awareness, in clarity, in attention, in your ability to say, wait a minute, that doesn't match the facts. The 4K moment isn't just about video quality. It's about mental clarity. It's about seeing through distortion. It's about recognizing when you're being emotionally steered instead of truthfully informed. A system that depends on your ignorance is terrified of your awareness. As more people start to look beyond the surface, the tactics will get louder, more dramatic, more desperate. That is usually the final phase before truth becomes undeniable. Because when control starts slipping, those who rely on it cling tighter. But the grip is already weakening. And the last thing they want is for you to realize just how much power you have once you stop buying what you're being sold.